إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستهديه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا. من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له، وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأن محمدا عبده ورسوله بلغ الرسالة وأدى الأمانة ونصح للأمة فكشف الله به الغمة وجاهد في الله حق جهاده. أما بعد, my dear brothers and sisters in Islam, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I begin by reminding myself first, and then all of my brothers and sisters here, have taqwa in Allah, be conscious of Him, be aware of Him, fear Him, have hope in Him, as He is worthy of having taqwa in, as He tells us in the Quran, O you who believe, have taqwa in your Lord as He is worthy of having taqwa in, and do not die except in a state of Islam or a state of submission. In the middle Madani period, so about 5 or 6 years after the hijrah of the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wasallam from Mecca to Medina, one of the Arab tribes around Medina had accepted Islam. So the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wasallam sent one of his companions to go and collect zakat from this new tribe of Muslims. And as the man was traveling over to the tribe's place, he began to feel some fear towards them. We don't know why from the hadith he was afraid of them. Perhaps there was some history from Jahiliyyah between him and this tribe, but he was worried that they may kill him if he requested from them the zakat. And the fear was so strong that he never completed the task that Rasulullah gave him. He turned around and went straight back to Medina without ever asking for the zakat. But now he has a problem. The Rasul sent him to collect zakat, he came back with no zakat, and he needs to give an explanation. And so he tells him, Ya Rasulullah, when I asked them to give the zakat, they refused and they threatened to kill me if I was to take it. Now the Rasul is he's sitting with his Sahaba and he needs to decide what is he going to do with this news. This is a big deal. If you have one of the tribes of Medina now coming into Islam but already refusing one of the major tenets, something needs to be done. And so the major Sahaba that were sitting with the Rasul begin to argue back and forth what should be done. Some of them begin to suggest, Ya Rasulullah, send someone else to confirm the news. And this was the habit of the Rasul ﷺ. Others were saying, Ya Rasulullah, send a contingent of armed forces and let them deal with it. If it's true, let them deal with it. And if it's not, they'll tell you. And before the Rasul ﷺ could decide, and there are different narrations as to how long this went on, the chieftain of that tribe arrived in Medina and he went straight to the Rasul ﷺ. Apparently some news had reached him. And he told them, Ya Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, we never saw this man's face. He never even introduced himself to us for us to refuse to pay the zakat. We want to pay the zakat and we are firmly on the belief of you, we are firmly on Tawheed and the belief in you as a prophet, Ya Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. At this occasion, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed the ayah in Surah Al-Hujurat. He said, Ya ayyuhal ladhina amanu, in ja'akum fasiqun binaba'in fatabayyanu an tusibu qawman bijahalatin fatusbihu ala ma fa'altum nadimin. Allah revealed at this occasion, O ye who believe, if a wicked person comes to you with any news, ascertain its truth, lest ye harm people unwittingly, and afterwards become full of regret and repentance for what you have done. So Allah at this occasion sends down this admonition that before you take any action on any news, O believers, you have to confirm. Now we are at the start of what is the insanity of the American political system. So about 18 months of non-stop presidential election news and discussion. Almost 24/7 news coverage. And in these 18 months of 24/7 news coverage, almost nothing of real value will be said. But much would be spread around. And so I thought for the first half of the khutbah today, I wanted to remind us of three distinct rules of engagement when it comes to information that the Quran and Sunnah teach us to use. So the Quran and the Sunnah of Rasul teach us how should you deal with news and information as it comes to you. What should you do with it? And so I wanted to spend the first half of the khutbah discussing 3 tips from the Quran and Sunnah on how to deal with this information. Especially because in today's world, the media is such an overwhelming force around the world. If the corporate media decides to push a narrative, whether you like it or not, you will be forced to hear about it and potentially have an opinion on it and discuss it, and in some cases discuss it with complete passion and fervor, when perhaps if no one ever brought it up to you, you wouldn't care about it anyway. And so we're living in a time where news spreads very quickly, and the sources of news have power to dictate what you care about. And so I thought it a good reminder, with the gearing up of this season and with some of the insanity that's already ensued from the presidential campaigns, on highlighting these 3 rules. So here's the first one from this story. The Rasul ﷺ gets this very hot piece of news. You have dissension in your ranks. You have a rebellion brewing. And some of the Sahaba begin to feed into it. Ya Rasulullah, what's going to happen if your leadership is questioned already? We're just perhaps, if it's in the 5th or 6th year, they had just finished with the Battle of Al-Khandaq. They've just established themselves. If already you're going to have some of your own followers deserting you and challenging your authority, what's going to happen? And so the fervor is starting to build up. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala comes down and says, O you who believe, before you take any action from any news, you need to confirm it. And so this is the first tip that I wanted to start off with. Because in today's world, you know, there's a news clip going around this morning. One of the presidential candidates, and I won't honor him by mentioning his name on the minbar, the Republican candidate who's getting all the news these days, was asked yesterday at a rally. A man stood up to ask him and he said, we have a big problem in this country, and it's called Muslims. And they have death camps starting in the United States, and we already know that there's a Muslim in the White House. This is the question to the presidential candidate. And the response of the candidate is, there are many people saying that, and I hear a lot of bad things, and we'll be looking into all of this. So you see, we are now, and we all know this because we're Muslims, we are now the victims of people not being able to or willing to confirm news when it comes to them. Nowhere in the United States is there any such thing as a death camp. Nowhere in the United States are there mosques training people to kill Americans. In fact, the vast majority, if not every single masjid in this country, goes maybe too far towards the side of American patriotism than the opposite. And so from our minbars, perhaps if you wanted to criticize, you might say we're a little bit too pro-American and not enough, we don't do enough criticism of our country. And yet you have people all across this country who believe it from the bottom of their hearts, that you and I sitting here today hate them and are just lying in wait, waiting to kill them. As ludicrous as that sounds. And so I wanted to remind me and you, because our community as Muslims, we fall into the same problem all the time. How many conspiracy theories have you heard? That the reason why certain diseases are up in the Middle East is because a certain country wanted to contaminate Middle Eastern water. Or every single political problem that we face as an ummah is because of somebody else's fault. And there's not enough just consideration of what we have to do. How many of you are willing to believe just about anything if it's said about a black person, or a Jew, or a homosexual for that matter? And that's not to agree with their lifestyle. But how many of us are just willing to buy any news that's said about these people if it fits into our narrative of what we already want to believe? And so if we're going to be prophetic, if we're going to be the way, if we're going to be on the way of the Rasul ﷺ, whatever news comes to you, stop and ascertain just how true it really is. How likely is this to be true? Are there stats behind it? You know, the funny thing is, in all these presidential debates that they do, there's always a fact-checking website that comes out. I think the highest rating I've ever seen on them is about 30 to 35%. Meaning of all the candidates, only about a third of what they say is actually fact-based information. Everything else is just hyperbole and outright lies at times. And so number one, be sure, as you're hearing everything that's coming, confirm every piece of news, whether it's about us or about any other group in this country. The second story I wanted to bring up. During the Battle of Uhud, it was one of the most precarious and dangerous times for the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, because he was injured in at least 3 places. He had 2 injuries, one on each side of his face, and he had an injury in his body. And he was being pursued by Khalid bin al-Walid and his contingent as he was racing up the mountain of Uhud after he had warned the Muslims from behind to take cover. And so it's him and perhaps 2 or 3 Sahaba who are fending off this contingent from the top of the mountain. He's already injured in a few places, and as the blood is streaming down his face, he makes a statement. He says, and how will Allah ever forgive you for what you have done to the messenger He has sent you? So he's speaking to Quraysh. How can Allah ever forgive you for what you've done to the man He sent to save you? And to this, and as a side note, this is one of those evidences of his truthfulness to being a prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends down in the Quran about this statement. He says to Muhammad, لَيْسَ لَكَ مِنَ الْأَمْرِ شَيْءٌ أَوْ يَتُوبَ عَلَيْهِمْ أَوْ يُعَذِّبَهُمْ فَإِنَّهُمْ ظَالِمُونَ وَلِلَّهِ مَا فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَمَا فِي الْأَرْضِ يَغْفِرُ لِمَنْ يَشَاءُ وَيُعَذِّبُ مَنْ يَشَاءُ وَاللَّهُ غَفُورٌ رَحِيمٌ. Allah says, لَيْسَ لَكَ مِنَ الْأَمْرِ شَيْءٌ. To Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he says, you made this statement that Allah will never forgive them. You have no place in making that statement. It is not your place, O Muhammad, to decide who will be forgiven and who will be punished, who I will extend my mercy to and who I will withhold it from, who I will guide and who I will lead astray. That is not for you to say. But Allah does say in that case, just as a side note, I'll go into this in the next point, He says, فَإِنَّهُمْ ظَالِمُونَ. Definitely they have wronged you, they have definitely done you wrong, but it's not your place to decide who gets forgiven and who doesn't. Meaning Allah, owns what's in the heavens and what's in the earth, and it's for me to forgive and for me to punish. And so know your place, Ya Muhammad. Now this is said to our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam as he's bleeding from this attack from the very people that he's done everything possible to try and save. And so the reminder that I wanted to give you and I is, don't speak about things you don't have specialty in. And specifically now, given the intense amount of anti-Islam rhetoric that is coming out, and specifically because my guess is, if you work in a predominantly non-Muslim place, or if you go to school at one of our major universities, you are probably engaging in a lot of debate around Islam. You have every right, and you should be proud enough and knowledgeable enough to defend your beliefs and your convictions, definitely. But if you don't know, say you do not know. And I mean this from 2 specific angles. Number 1, none of us here, myself included, are in a position to give statements about what is acceptable and unacceptable in Islam. Don't start quoting one ayah or one hadith here and determine that something perhaps is completely haram or completely halal based on that one reading you've done. Neither you nor I are qualified to do so. You can very easily say, this scholar of Islam has said such and such, and this scholar has said such and such. But do not come up with your own definitions. Because you're going to fall into one of 2 problems. Either you're going to say something is haram when it's not, and you're going to misrepresent this deen, or you're going to say something's okay when it's not, and you're going to misrepresent this deen. And in both cases, you will weaken yourself and you will weaken the religion in the eyes of the person that you're speaking to. Our goal in these debates is not to convert. It's not even to defend. Our goal is simply to speak the truth as best as we can. Allah guides and Allah misguides. It's not up to us. It is our job to speak the truth. So if you are not in a position to say whether something is or is not Islamic or un-Islamic, halal, haram, stay away from that altogether. But then there's a whole vast amount of our religion that does not come down to halal and haram. Understanding what our belief system and our creed is. knowing about stories of the Rasul ﷺ. So they want to attack Aisha. They want to attack his marriage to Zainab. They want to attack what happened with the Jewish tribes. These are not matters of halal haram. But if you're going to speak about them, know them first. Know them first. Do not just throw something out and say, well, there's no way he would have done that, without understanding what could have happened or might have happened. And do not let someone tell you something about the religion that isn't true. One of my first exposures to this whole debate was someone who once presented me with one part of one hadith, where the Rasul ﷺ had actually punished someone by cutting off his hands and his legs, so his right hand and his left leg, and let him bleed out. And he put that up and said, you need to tell me why your Prophet does this. And I was in shock many years, like 10 years ago. I had never read this hadith, I had no clue. Did the Prophet really do this or not? It sounds so harsh, it sounds so vicious. Why would he do that? I had no clue what to say. And I was very willing to want to say, no, there's no way that's true. And there was another part of me that wanted to say, yeah, and so what? The Prophet did it. That's right. I had no clue whether it was true or not. Now when I went back to the story, for those of you who don't know, that did happen. And it was because this person came into Medina. And he pretended to take Shahada along with a group of friends of his. And then he told the Rasul ﷺ, we're sick and we're poor, we have no one to take care of us. The Rasul ﷺ told them to go to the place where the state wealth is taken care of. So the person who handles all of the livestock in the land that is owned by Medina, so it's like the taxes of the state, he said, go to him and he will take care of it. When they went to him, they killed him, stole all the cattle and left. And so essentially, they stole from the state, committed murder, and committed treason all in one shot. Any country on earth would determine to kill those people. This was not some vicious, disgusting act from the Rasul ﷺ. This was a criminal being punished. Had I not known that and just spoken ignorantly, how many different ways could I have misrepresented the faith? How many of us are willing to misrepresent it now because of the marriage to Aisha, without ever really knowing what happened there, or who Aisha was, or what that relationship looked like? And there are many more examples like that. How many of us get quoted one part of one verse from one part of the Quran, and we're so quick to either want to disown it or latch onto it without recognizing what the verse says. They want to quote that verse and fight them wherever you find them. Wallahi, it's impossible. If you read that surah from start to finish, just read the 5 ayat that it's compassing, just read the full ayah even. It's impossible to come away with an understanding that Muslims are commanded to kill people wherever they find them. There's a million disclaimers, and that's a misnomer, that's hyperbole. There are several disclaimers just in that verse alone that are describing how and when this is supposed to be interpreted. Not to mention the context of where the surah came down. What was the ayah specifically referring to? If you don't know this stuff before you start speaking about it, know it, and then talk about it. And if you don't, be honest enough and courageous enough to say, I don't know enough to have this discussion with you now. Let me go find out and I'll come back to you. Do not fall into the trap of speaking about your faith when you don't know about it. So number one, confirm whatever news comes to you before you act on it or pass it on. Number two, don't speak when it's not your place to speak. And number three, there was, in the early period of the Hijrah, right before the Battle of Badr, the Rasul ﷺ wanted to know, what are the movements of Quraysh? What's going on? How are they mobilizing? And so he sent a small contingent to this encampment. That's typically where travelers coming in and out of Mecca stop right before they either enter into Mecca or just after they come out of Mecca. And so a group of Sahaba reached there. And as they're coming out, Rasulullah gave them strict instructions. You are to collect information and come back to me. Those are the instructions he gave them. Now they get to this location and they see a caravan of Quraysh coming. And it's a fat, wealthy caravan that's barely guarded. Maybe 2 or 3 people from Quraysh are in the caravan. The Muslims are about 8 or 9 people. They can easily overpower them and take the entire caravan back to Medina. And so there's one problem though. Besides the fact that Rasulullah didn't tell them to fight, it was the last day of one of the sacred months. And it was the time of Asr. Now during the sacred months, both before Islam and during Islam, no fighting is allowed. So whether you were Muslim or not in Arabia, during this month you're not allowed to fight. But the month ends at Maghrib. So it's a few hours. They were there at Asr time. If we wait it out, the caravan may pass us by. But if we take action now, we'll be violating the sacred month, but the ghanima, the booty that we can win for the Muslims. And keep in mind, these were all muhajirun. These were people who left everything behind in Mecca. They were once poor, rich, taken care of with their families. They had to go to Medina and be poor. And now they're looking at this caravan and they want it. And so they decided, let's just take the caravan. And they take it and they take it back to Medina. And the Rasul ﷺ becomes angry. He says, I never told you to fight. I told you to collect information and come back to me. And the Quraysh relished the opportunity. And they began spreading poetry and news around all of Arabia. Look at these so-called righteous people killing innocent men during the sacred month. What kind of prophet is this? What kind of righteousness is this? And the Rasul ﷺ didn't know what to say or do. They have a point. The Muslims broke a rule. They were not supposed to fight at this time. The Rasul ﷺ does not know what to say. And so Allah responds from atop the seven heavens, and He says, if they ask you about fighting in the sacred months, it's a long ayah, so I'll just paraphrase in English. If they ask you about fighting in the sacred month, say that fighting in the sacred month is haram. It is a big thing, you should not do it. But know that to kick people out of their homes, and to keep them away from Baytul Haram, meaning the Kaaba, and to force them to leave their religion, and to oppress them is far worse in the eyes of Allah than this killing that's done during the sacred months. And then He says, because in general, oppression is far worse than killing. To oppress is far worse than killing. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala responds on behalf of the Muslims saying, yes, what you did was wrong, 100%. But what Quraysh has been doing for these last 13 or 14 years is far worse. And so don't give in to their rhetoric and don't give in to their propaganda. You should repent. What you did was not good. But don't fall into the traps that they're trying to fall or to trap you. And the lesson I want us to glean from this is the importance of nuance. Here is Allah willing to say, Muslims, you did something wrong. You shouldn't have done that. But you know what? Those perpetrating the crimes against you have also done wrong, and probably far worse wrong. We are living in a time where this exact phrase should probably be said every day. There are Muslims committing crimes, evil acts, every single day in the name of our religion, and we should not be afraid to stand up and say so. But let us not be stupid enough or foolish enough to fall for the propaganda. Our country remains one of the biggest perpetrators of terrorism across the globe. Whether you want to call it terrorism or not, when you drop bombs from a drone on innocent people across the world, that is terrorism. Whether we like it or not, we are engaged as a country in terrorism. Far more than many of these Muslim groups do. We're propping up dictators all across the Muslim world and in other places that terrorize their people far more than these groups do. And we back perhaps the most tyrannical terroristic regime in the region in Israel. And so yes, we should be willing to say what the Muslims are doing in certain times, 100% wrong. We don't stand with them at all. But let's not be foolish enough to just let our countrymen get away with it. We get away with it. We are responsible for terrorism as well, here in America. And we're responsible for it sometimes in our own midst. What the police do to African American males, especially in this country, what the police do to Native American males, especially in this country, is a form of terrorism, and we should not be afraid to stand up and say it. So yes, we recognize the evils from people who share our religion. We also recognize the evil from people who share our country. But more than this, a part of the problem of today's media is that it forces you to accept black and white binaries. Everything is either you're conservative or progressive. You're good or you're evil. You're pro-American or you're anti-American. This whole form of discussion is meaningless and worthless. It gets us nowhere. If you want to have a serious, meaningful discussion, let's be real. There's some good and some bad on all sides. If you're willing to discuss with me with honesty and nuance, we might be able to come to some solutions. And we should be the first to call for this. because our country is suffering greatly from this lack of nuance. Everything in this entire political discussion today, you're either pro the Iran deal or anti the Iran deal. You either like vaccines or you hate vaccines. Just as a couple of examples. There's no nuance in the middle. There's no willingness to sit down and actually discuss. There may be some good on both sides and some evil on both sides. So always confirm the news that you hear. Know your place and don't speak if you don't have the knowledge. And have nuance. Always be critical enough to understand the nuance of every situation. I ask Allah to make some of those who hear what is said and follow the best of it. إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستهديه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا. I wanted to switch gears just slightly now and talk about two quick points that are coming up in the news now that I wanted to just share some reminders on. The first one takes me back to the story of Al-Khandaq, the battle of the Confederates. Now at this battle, the Muslims were at their most afraid. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes their emotional state that this was the worst that they had suffered with. And the reason was, you had at least 10,000 Arabs, Qurayshi and non-Qurayshi. And so you had all these Arab tribes that have now united under the banner of being anti-Muhammad and anti-Islam. And you had the Jewish tribes of Khaybar and formerly Medina aligned with them, including the Banu Qurayda who were still inside of Medina. And so all of these disparate, different groups have now aligned against the Muslims out of their hatred for this new religion. Now you can see the similarities between their time and ours. One of the beautiful things about that story was that this exact union was what Allah used to break apart the entire battle without one drop of blood being spilled. And so the story goes that an Arab man from Ghatafan, he says, Allah threw Islam into my heart after 3 weeks or so of sieging Medina. So they were waiting outside of Medina, they were trying to wait the Muslims out. Eventually they're going to run out of food, they're going to have to either surrender or fight us. He says about after 3 weeks of this siege, Allah threw Islam into my heart. And so I snuck across the border, across the ditch, and I went in and I met Muhammad ﷺ and I took my shahada. I told him, Ya Rasulullah, let me fight alongside of you. And the Prophet told him, what are you going to be able to do for us here? We're completely outnumbered. Go and see if you can do something for us on the outside. He says, Ya Rasulullah, do you allow me to say whatever I need to say? He says, yes, war is deception. Say what you need to say. So the man goes to Bani Qurayda and he tells them, at some point, the Quraysh, they're going to get tired. It's already been 3 weeks. And they can easily just leave. And if they leave, you're left holding the bag. You have now committed treason against this constitution of Medina. If they leave without you, you will fall to the sword of the Muslims. And so what you should do is ask Quraysh to give you 70 of their noblemen so that they cannot run away without saving you and their men. And they agreed. And then he goes to Quraysh. And he tells them, I know that Bani Qurayda are starting to reconsider their stance, and as a way of showing their apologies to the Prophet, they want to take 70 of your nobles and give it to him as a prisoner of war. And so if they come ask you for it, don't give it to them. And then he goes back to his tribe and says the same thing. If they ask you for it, don't give it to them. And so Bani Qurayda comes and asks for the 70. Quraysh is now suspicious. They recognize in their mind, they're turning on us. Bani Qurayda believes that Quraysh is turning on them. They kind of just part ways. And he says, Abu Sufyan tells Bani Qurayda, go back and we'll let you know in a day or so what we're going to do. A few other things happened. Allah sent the storm and the entire army just dispersed. The Muslims did not have to fight at all. And Allah handed Bani Qurayda to the Muslims on a silver platter. This very thing that seemed to be this united group, what seemed to unite this group was this anti-Islam. And what caused the Muslims so much fear was that all of these people are now uniting against us. What are we going to do? And Allah used that very false unity to destroy them completely. So the fact that you were all disparate tribes, eventually they began to question one another. Well, we're Quraysh, they're not going to stand with us. And we're the Jews, why would they care about us? They can easily walk away. This is their people. Muhammad is a Qurashi. They can easily just walk away and leave him to take our wealth and so on. And so Allah used the very thing that seemed to be their strength against them. Now I thought of this when I heard the story of young Ahmed in Texas this week. The young Muslim boy who brought that clock into school. And they say that they believe there was a bomb, yet no evacuation was made. They sat with the bomb for hours and questioned him. No evidence that they really believe there was a bomb. It seems to be. It seems to be. After several days now, news coming out, it seems to be the fact that this young man was a Muslim of brown skin definitely played a role in why he was targeted in this way. Now the beautiful thing is though, Texas is perhaps, it's not the most racist state in the country, but it's one of the most racist states in the country, by and large. A lot of good people there, but in general, this problem does exist there. I am sure, without a shadow of a doubt, because he discussed it, the young boy, he has faced discrimination in the past in his school and in his hometown. Now here is Allah, in the days that have followed, how many people have you seen have come out to give this young man his support? President Obama came out and supported him. I've seen personally people willing to give him $250,000 or more in scholarships for high school prep schools so that he can hone his skills as an inventor. And I've seen many notable people within American culture come out and offer him all sorts of perks and benefits to fast track him in his life. So here is Allah again, using Islamophobia to strengthen this young boy who might have otherwise been held back by racism and hatred. And so I only highlight this to say this has been the sunnah of Allah, especially with His Messenger and the Muslims, since this religion began. If you're facing hatred, we are facing hatred. We're not getting it the worst in this country, but we're facing it. And we may face it for a period of time to come. But we stay true to who we are, we stick with Allah, He will turn that very hatred on its head and use it to bring about truth and goodness for us and others, inshallah. So keep your resolve with Allah and nothing else first. He will be able to turn your enemies on themselves. Now the last story I wanted to highlight was regarding this massive refugee crisis. What they're calling, unfortunately, the migrant crisis of Europe. Again, the media playing its games. Where you have millions of refugees now trying to flee these war-torn areas in the Middle East. And what I want to do is ask a very personal question. I don't want to make a political question about which countries are helping and not helping. That's all to be debated. Because there's something I think we all have to ask. It's very easy for us here to sit back and criticize all these countries and peoples. But I had to stop and ask myself this week, would I be willing, if the United States opened the door, would I be willing to take in a family of refugees and give them of my own wealth and let them stay with me and let them be cared for by me and my family until they get back on their feet? I think this is a question we should each ask ourselves. When I think back to that system of mu'akha, when the Rasul after the hijrah gave every Ansari one muhajir, the remarkable thing is to put yourselves in the shoes of the Ansari, not the muhajir. Every single Ansari, every man from Medina had to give up so much of his wealth for almost nothing in return, for years on end. In fact, there was a period of time where the muhajir became the inheritor of the Ansari. After a year or so that was removed. But there was a period of time where they were the ones who inherited too. It didn't even go to his family. And so here you have the Ansar willing to give up everything they have and more for their brothers in Islam. Now I ask you to ask yourself, because I had to ask myself this question and answer it seriously. If I had the opportunity